Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm one of the lead animators on Pop Paper City. Today we're going to do a brief rundown of how we animate the characters and the tools we use to speed up our workflow. We're actually using an older version of Cinema 4D, S24. We had to stick with that for pipeline reasons. So without further ado, let's start this thing. So one of the first things I want to talk about, because this is important and it's every animator's bread and butter, are the 12 principles of animation. Without these, you are not animating anything. And they are squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead action and pose to pose, follow through and overlap, slow in, slow out, arcs, secondary action, timing, exaggeration, solid drawing, and appeal. All of these things together are the foundation and the rules that are being put in place by many artists before us. Yeah, basically I want to just quickly go over a few of these which I feel are the more important ones for the style of animation that we're doing. Squash and stretch is important. It's going to give you a sense of weight, flexibility, and movement in general. I also want to talk about anticipation, because this is important for what we're doing. We need to absolutely guide our audience because they're younger, so it needs to be perfectly clear where the character is going to be moving to or where that character wants you to look. Staging's a very similar thing, and a bunch of these other ones are going to be kind of pertaining to the same thing. We need to be led to where we're going to go. So I'm not going to go through all of these because there's 12 of them and there's a lot to talk about. I 100% recommend that any animator or budding animator learn these and make them rules to live by. And that being said, let's move into a little bit of blocking. So what we've got here is a fresh scene which has been sent to us from layout, and we're going to do some basic checks to make sure that this is ready to go. So we're going to need to go into the project settings down here, and to key interpolation, make sure that we are set to stepped, because we don't want to worry about spline or anything like that at the moment. This is purely getting the poses down. I think we're going to go to project settings, make sure it's set to the correct frame range, and we should be good to go. So I'm only going to be animating this guy today, so we're going to solo him out. Where are you, Plum? Here we are. So these little buttons here, super handy. Quickly grab anything in the scene. And we're going to need some audio. So the blocking stage is essentially your roadmap for your animation. You're going to want to lay down your key poses. These are extremes or key poses, and these need to be the clearest possible poses you can use to tell the story. So what we're going to do then is we're going to start putting some poses down on this guy, just to get some ideas for timing and things like that. So where are you, Plum? Okay. So we're going to have all of his keys selected, and what we're going to do is we are going to use the pose library, which is something I need to get into on this video as well. And we're going to start laying some poses down on Plum. The pose library is one thing that I wanted to cover because it's another tool that we use to exponentially speed up our workflow. So what that means is we can reuse old poses, we can create new poses that are going to be used frequently in an episode, and we can very quickly throw those down onto the character. So let's do some of that now. So I kind of want him in an appealing pose. He could be maybe looking to his left because the button's over here. So let's just throw in a nice little confident pose. There we go. And look at how confident he looks. This button down here, which I neglected to mention earlier, is our auto key. So if this selected, whatever you do to your character after this is going to lay down a key for us. So we kind of want him to appear off balance here. So let's move it forward slightly and find some poses that look like he could be off balance. Okay, something like this might work. He's on one leg, and we can work with this pose in a minute. And let's go forward again, maybe another 10 frames, and throw in another pose that kind of feels kind of off balance. I'm going to go with the opposite leg because I want it to feel separated and sort of split out. And then we'll have him settle back down to his comfortable pose where he's maybe a little bit unsure of what's happened. Okay, that feels pretty good. And then, although the sound's not playing, I know that around here, he's going to start speaking, and he's going to say something along the lines of, that'll be the cave door starting to open. So what we're going to do for the last part of this is throw in our last keyframe, and I want him to be gesturing like he's had an idea. And we've got some poses, here we go, some poses for that here. So boom, and there he is with his idea. So if we briefly play this, it's not going to look like much. But what we're doing is we're getting a sense of what we want to happen in the animation and the rough timings of it, okay? So boom, boom, boom. Okay, so for me, I think that most of the time other artists, and myself included, will go into a lot more detail about this in general, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, I think this is fine. So what I want to talk about now quickly before we move off of this section of the blocking and I show you what we end up with is adding in-betweens and some breakdowns. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and use this pose to this pose and show you how some of the principles of animation we discussed a moment ago actually apply to even while you're blocking, and they're worth bearing in mind from the start. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add an anticipation pose here, and I want him to lean up this way so that we can anticipate this way like we spoke about earlier because we're guiding our audience, and then we come through and follow through to the gesture this side, okay? So let's add a bit of anticipation here. We need his body up in the air. Let's go for this one. That's going to give us a slight push up to anticipate. Then what we'll do is we'll use the tween tool here, find the center of this pose. Yeah, about there will do. And I want him to dip down. I want this to feel like a real cartoony, big cartoony take. So we're going to really have him dip down low so that we can really push up and exaggerate those big extremes, okay? So now what we do is if we now play this through, this little section of blocking, we end up with the anticipation and all of the push through. Now this is very loose. What we'll do when we get to the spline section of this is we'll push these extremes and we'll talk about, how this helps and roughly how far we can push these guys because we have stylistic choices that have been made that we have to stick to. Some of that being based around the dynamics of these characters. So with that being said, very briefly, let's touch on a little bit of facial posing and animation because I think I want to briefly talk about how this kind of ties into the rigging stuff that Tom was talking about earlier in a previous tutorial. So let's go ahead and select the face. Okay, so again, in this scene, he's very confident, and we need him to express that in his facial poses. So let's find some stuff here that leads to that. I like the wide eye, shows that he's looking at what he's doing. Let's get his pupil over this side, looking to where he is. And I want his mouth to kind of convey more excitement than it is at the moment. Let's go for a big smile. And we'll maybe crank that to the left a little to break it up. So another thing to think about while you're animating is symmetrical. Anything doesn't really work when you're animating. Asymmetry works much better, and it's cleaner to look at. So again, very briefly, these are the tools we use for that. These shapes have been laid out by other artists, and the rigging process, these will be put in there because they're essentially pose morphs that we're switching from one to another using a morphing tactic. But again, that will be something that we can cover in the rigging side of things or as a base for you to go and kind of do your own research into these things because we're not going to get this into a 20-minute session. I'm not going to be able to teach you to do that in 20 minutes. So this is a base. So again, with all that being said, I feel like we have some basic stuff here that we can kind of work with. So let's talk about timing and holds and some stuff like that. So I know that I don't want this foot, for example, to leave the floor as early as it does. So what we can do is take this keyframe of it lifting up, shift it along, and the foot will stay down, and we get that sense of force where his foot's still on the ground and we feel the force being pushed up. So there we go. So again, these are, same here. We're going to need this foot on the floor first because he feels off balance. So let's get that foot down early. And then you can take the weight, yeah? So I know this doesn't look like much, everybody, but trust me, it's just the start. Okay, so with all that being said, I think that's enough to speak about the very early stages of blocking and how we kind of go about it. We have audio that we work to. We stick to these things. We will then get feedback from leads or whoever, and if it's working, we move forward into Spline. It goes through a review process of our supervisor, Tom, after it's been through myself, the lead. And if everybody agrees, we move forward. So that being said, let's open up a actual finished block of these guys and take a look at how the few things I've told you and showed you apply and what they end up being. So let's get Plum by himself again. Let's get the audio in there again. There we go. And I'm just going to play this through to show you what a finished block looks like. Again, based on what we did before, it doesn't look like much, but this is a very, very fast and rough tutorial. So this is what we end up with once everyone's happy with the blocking. So let's play this through. Very pleased with that, if I do say so myself. You'll notice that we don't actually have very much going on with the face here. The blocking is mainly to get everything timed out. Everyone's happy with where they are. The body mechanics look sound. You can lay down facial animation here if your supervisors or leads require it. I've been fortunate enough to be working with a guy that just trusts that I can deliver these facial expressions, and for the most part it's not something we really worry about in blocking, but again it depends on the shot, the scene, and the environment that you're working to. So this is like I said, the final stage of blocking. I was extremely happy with this, so what I'm going to do now is move on ahead to the first spline pass, which is this guy here. So again, we're going to solo our character out because we don't want the scene to feel heavy while we're working. Let's grab our audio. So what you would do here as well, this would be the time to grab props, like there's a little camera here. You solo that out so that you're working with all that.
So, sorry about that, guys. We've had a bit of an issue with the microphone, and so if the audio's slightly different, my apologies for that. Okay, so we're going to pick up from where we were. We were finishing up the block out. We're moving to the spline now, so everybody should be happy. Myself happy, my animation supervisor should be happy, and then we can move to here. So the first thing we want to do when we move into spline, grab Plum's visual picker, select all of the controls, and what I want to do is I want to just set this to spline to get an idea of how this is feeling. So we're not going to do any adjustments, we're just going to leave it how it is, and we're going to pop it into spline. We'll also, what we didn't do is solo Plum out, so we're going to grab the audio. We're going to grab Plum here too. And then we can see a little bit clearer what's going on. So let's give this a quick play.
That should be the cave door starting to open!
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
That should be the cave door starting to open!
So I mean, this is the original final spline, which I was happy with anyway. But like, yeah, we in the previous shot we tried to match it a little and do some similar stuff. So I'd be more than happy with this for a block out. So that being said, let's talk a tiny bit about the graph editor. So I want to grab all of Plum's controls again and show you what we're looking at in the graph editor. Let's grab his main control for his head. Because some things I want to demonstrate is just a few of the tools that we have available to us in the graph editor. So yeah, so with the graph editor, like we said before, you want this to be a nice sweeping curve, unless it's a hold where we get the straight, the flat here. These are holds where he doesn't move. There'll be artifacts as well, like maybe a few moments like here where this is just a sharp movement. It might look here as well. This might look like an artifact, but if we play it through, we can see that his elbow actually moves really quickly into a position there for a stretch. So in general, generally speaking, you want this to be sweeping curves. So let's talk about some of the stuff this thing does real quick. Let's grab this one curve here. Yeah, to make this a sweeping curve while we're working with it, I mean, in general, you can grab the splines, soften these a little bit, and it'll give you a soft sort of like a mild cushion animation here. This is handy. This if you want to make a moving hold or anything like that. Another thing to we can use in here is if we see this point here. So let's say we're doing a bouncing ball animation. This is gonna be a soft kind of, like, we can see if he sort of slowly comes in and then ever so slightly pushes out. But if we wanted to do like an impact, this can't be a sweep. This has to be a sharp point for the impact. So if you press, I believe it's shift, we can break these and create that sharp impact. And you can see how it's changing the curve, which is changing the animation. Now, if we really look at that, it's very sudden down and up. So there's just a couple of tools that you can use in the graph editor. You know, this is our bread and butter. This is where our animators spend a lot of time. Get used to seeing this if you're interested in animation. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with that so far. So one thing we can also do here is we can quickly make a preview of this animation. Because the timeline's nice, and you know, it can give us a good idea, but it's not real time. So you know, if the scene's got a lot of particularly heavy things in it, or a lot of cloners for the trees in the backgrounds, this can get really sluggish, and it's not going to give you an accurate representation of your animation. So what we'll do is we'll come up to here where it says animate, and down here where it says make preview, and we can quickly fire off a preview to check it for timing and speed and pacing and things like that. We're going to leave it to preview range. If you've got like a pre-rolled timeline here for effects and things like that to settle down, you can do it manually and bring it back to 0, because you don't want to, you know, play blast 200 frames of simulation that's firing up, you know. So we can do it manually and set it to 0 in the final frame here, but we're just going to use preview range. We'll hit OK. Hopefully this doesn't take too long, guys. There we go. So I'm going to try and drag this into a window to see if we can. Let's drag it into here and shift all this over. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this because I've dragged it into the main window, but
That will be the cave door starting to open!
okay, so as you can see, it gives us a slightly better idea of what's going on with the timing. Some things that I might consider doing here, just like again looking at it as a, you know, someone that's going to move through this shot and do the tweaks. Things that I would be keeping an eye on here is this foot. Maybe I'd keep this down longer, make it feel more like a push, so it feels like his weight's down on this and it doesn't just feel like he's floating off of it. But in general, this isn't bad. We can use that actually to discuss some of the other ways we use this graph editor. So let's find the key. Let's turn the sound off too. Let's find the key where his foot comes up is there. So I kind of want to hold this down for a little longer. Maybe 2 frames just to make it feel like he's pushed off. I'll move this later as well. There we go, and we can see that how that's made that ever such a slight difference. He feels like he's trying to maintain balance, you know, and then this leg just has to lift up to kind of counterbalance himself. So I mean, this is kind of working. Some other things I want to talk about with the graph editor here, particularly as we've got this lift off motion. Let's go to the Y translation. So as we said before, this is a curve relationship between the animation that you're seeing and the curve here. So up and positive meaning upwards or positive motion, forwards rotation, and down meaning negative or downwards rotation or backwards or negative rotations. So what I want to talk about here is, like we said earlier, if something is flat, that equals no movement, right? So what we see how it's saving. Okay, right. So yeah, as we said before, level and horizontal means no movement, vertical means maximum movement. So as we can see here, if we come through here, the foot is not moving, at least not off of its Y, not up. So if we come back to here, we can see that it kind of slowly floats up and almost maintains this position because we've got this sweeping pose, which is kind of what we're looking for. Now, another thing I want to quickly discuss before we move off the graph editor is easing in and easing out, which is one of the principles of animation we spoke about earlier. So we've got this direct line here, which means it kind of just one speed to the floor, you know, which might be fine here. We'll do it on the upwards motion. It might be fine on the downwards motion because again he's coming down and we want that sharp impact on the floor, but on the up we're probably going to want a bit of acceleration. So we'll come to the middle. Let's level this out as well so it makes it nice and clear. So we'll come to the middle here, and if we set a key here, what we can see is that having this key here, let's actually spread this out a little too. Yeah, so what we can see here is by adding this key in the middle, if we set it like this, what we're doing is we're creating a this is a very extreme version of it, but we're creating this super long ease in here, super quick motion here because vertical equals maximum motion, and then we're easing out into this soft one. So if we scooch through it, you'll see that it quickly accelerates through the middle and then it slows down for a bit longer at the top. What we can also do here is bring these back so we get a slightly softer ease. There we go. So now we should hopefully be looking at an ever so slightly, there we go, see, a slight acceleration, rapid movement through the middle, and then deceleration there. You don't have to do this on every single thing. Most of the human body will move like this. Anything that's not mechanical, anything organic is going to kind of move like this. Things need time to accelerate and decelerate. So yeah, that's one of the other tools that we use in the graph editor here. So one other thing I want to cover here, guys, is the pose library and how we use this and can use this to speed up our workflow, ranging from things like copying a pose from a previously shot, you know, to work on hookups. If there's just a pose you like and you want to grab it for your own animation, you know, copying from scene to scene. There's any number of things that this can be useful for. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. Let's move this back over. I'm going to go ahead and open the graph editor, and this is probably going to, sorry, not the graph editor, the pose library. Hopefully this won't take long. Okay, so I'm going to have to dock this too, because I want to show you this. So to make a pose, again we're going to have to come back up to here, grab all of Plom's controls, because if we need to make sure we've got all the controls selected, because let's say we don't have the foot selected in this process here. What's going to happen is it's going to apply the pose to the rest of the body, and this foot's going to be left behind. So it could be over here, over there, anywhere, wherever you left it is where it's going to be. So we need to make sure we've got everything selected. We want to come over to our pose library here, and down at the bottom you'll see these few icons, create new pose. So we're going to click that. We want to call this, let's just call this plain test pose, because it's a very plain pose. Let's take a quick screen grab of that. Actually, we can't move it. So let's take a quick screen grab. We've got all of the controls we need. Excellent. So what we're going to do now is we come back over to here, and if we click Save to Libraries. Yeah, so we've created our pose, and if we come back over to our body poses, which I'm guessing is where it went. There we go, we can see plain test pose, and if we come to let's go back to here. So if we come anywhere in the post, sorry, in the timeline, click this little guy again with all of the controls selected, click this button here, and it should, there you go, throws a pose in. So we're able to quickly use this to, you know, like I said, link up between shots, you know, make a quick pose. There's any number of things this is useful for. So now that that's been sort of quickly breezed over, let's talk about the dope sheet, maybe. This is a good place to handle large numbers of keyframes. It's going to be the safest thing for it. It's just an easy way to do it. You're going to get very few issues here. Like if you know, grab a key in here and copy it, it's usually fine, but there are times where like one key might be slightly off. So what it will look like, you've got a key pose here, and then underneath it at like 0.3 on the key, you've got the original pose. So this here is just the safest way to do it. And like I said, save quick, selects everything in there, snaps it to the keys, you know, like huge numbers of keyframes. This is where it is. This is where it's at. Okay, so with all that being said, we've covered the timeline, the dope sheet, the graph editor, the pose library. Let's move on and maybe let's move into the next scene and maybe cover it. We'll do it here actually. Let's cover a tiny little bit of facial animation. Oh, we do. We can go over it anyway. So again, we want to open up Plum's visual picker. Up here, we'll go to the face, and because the eyes are done, we're just going to work on the lip sync. So over here in this panel, we have our lip sync poses, which is going to be our phonemes, like the M's, O's, F's, U's, things like that. And over here, we've got some more expression stuff where we can just push the shapes a little if we want to, mix them together. Mixing them together creates some interesting shapes. I find myself using a handful of these more often than not, excuse me, because they create such good shapes when blended together. But let's get into it. Let's turn the sound back on first. So we've got some audio. Okay. So what you'd want to do here is you want to listen for the moments where they're called phonemes. So B, P's, any definitive sound in the audio that we can sort of pick up on and put these poses to make it feel like a lip sync. For example, let's go there. We're going to start with the, okay, but from the block out we've just thrown this pose in here. So let's go and find a shape that feels a bit like he's saying the. So we'll sort of purse our lips a little. These guys don't have tongues, so this is particularly tricky. Maybe ooh shape a little more. I want to close the mouth. Let's see what we've got in here. There's nothing that we can really hold here, which is why we ended up with this. So it feels like he's going that rather than that, but it still kind of works for the audio. And then here at the A, we've already got a pose in here that we can use, but again, this is an extreme, if you want to call it that, of the lip sync poses. So the A and T, which is a pretty simple one we've got here. And if we play these through, that is kind of that simple, guys. There are other things you can do. You can bring a waveform into here and use that if you're a little bit more unsure of it. But usually this does it. Like here again, another tip for lip syncing would be any closed mouth shapes like B, P, F, anything like that. We as a viewer need a minute to register that, so it's probably best to hold that for 1 or 2 frames. Anything you want your viewers to register, you should probably hold for at least 2 frames. So the blinks, for example, particularly on Plum, because he's such a big character, we hold those shut usually for a couple of frames or maybe even 3 frames, because otherwise it feels like a flicker and it feels fast and it just doesn't feel right. So yeah, a good note is anything like that you want to be registered, hold it for at least 2 frames. So let's talk about some last things to do with animation, because we've kind of covered the tools that Maxon wanted us to cover. So again, we talked about the principles of animation earlier. I want to go through secondary and drag and things like that, and just show you how, you know, these things can help finish in animation, right? Let's turn the sound off again because we don't need that. So a really good example of this here is going to be his hat and his arms. So here, for example, his hat stays in the position where he's falling away from his hat. Gravity is going to take a little bit longer to act on that because it's lighter, and therefore we get this drag. And same with the arms. Drag over here as we fall away. His arm stays roughly where it is, and his body starts to drop down. So, you know, one of the principles of animation there directly applied to it. Again, please refer to them if you're not sure. So with all that being said, I think we can quickly do a play blast of the final thing as a finished piece and show you guys what you'll end up with if you're, you know, prepared to stick with it. This takes time. Okay, let's do a play blast and we'll move forward. So animate. Oh, wait a second. I want to do all the characters so that you guys can see that it actually looks quite nice. I'm very, very pleased with this piece of animation myself. So it's an opportunity for me to show off. Filter, geometry only. Okay, so again, like we did before, guys, animate, make a preview. We're going to use preview range again. Let's take a quick look at what we've ended up with here. Oh, it's this one here. Sorry. Here we go.
That will be the cave door starting to open. Ah!
I see Tom's looking good here.
That will be the cave door starting to open. Ah!
I'm really pleased with this. So yeah, thank you very much. I suppose I want to say thank you very much to Maxon for supporting us. Show's been great. It's been a great piece of software to work with. Yeah, here's to many, many more years. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Maxon. Thank you, everybody.